Hello there, fellow truth seekers. Doug Foster here again. This time I want to talk about clarification on fear. I got a comment that said that it was interesting, but it was a little confusing. I'm not making any excuses. I apologize for that. Sometimes, whenever you put a message together, and I try to put them together to where I can get them within a certain block of time because I don't want it to be, just too much and bore people or cause them to get fidgety and want to go on to something else. So I try to compact it into a block of time. But there's some subjects that really you just can't. You can't, and when you do, you lose something. So I want to kind of clarify on what I was talking about with fear and why I brought up kind of divergent subjects like Matthew 24 and Luke 21. Mainly because we're coming into those times, okay? And if you already are fearful and you have fear about whatever, you got to conquer that fear. Because the things that are coming, they're going to really put fear in you if you don't conquer it. And the beginning of the way that you do that, and I understand that the times we're living in now, for a believer here in America, I mean, and this is unprecedented in our history. When I was younger, coming up, people would readily go around and preach the gospel and tell people about Christ, and people were civil. They whether they believed or not, they would either hear you out, or they would just say, "I'm not interested," and they'd go on. Now, you're subject to be verbally abused or attacked, or even physically attacked. It's no longer civil anymore. But I brought up a few verses from the Messiah where he said, if you deny me, I'll deny you. If you don't confess me, I will not confess you. For the person that claims to be a believer, we are ambassadors to the Messiah, our King. And we're supposed to proclaim him to the rest of the world. And so we have to be fearless. And the only way we can overcome that fear is to face it. Okay, we have to face that fear. And if we truly are believe in Christ and are born again, then we're going to face that. We're going to tell people about him. We're going to confess him before man. And I believe that if you will face that fear and do that, that he will take fear away from you. But that's the first step. The first step is facing that fear of what people are going to think or what people are going to say. We've not had to experience what a lot of believers in other parts of the world have. In the Middle East, in Africa, in China, in a lot of other countries where people who follow the scriptures and faithfully follow the Messiah and the words of our Father, those people have been persecuted and killed for it. And so we here in America have been, blessed to not have to go through that kind of stuff, but it's coming. And the place that it's going to come from is not where you think. It's going to come from the religious system, the beast religious system, Chrislam. That's where it's going to come from. And, more so than anybody. And so we have to be fearless. And the only way that that can happen is to, you know, again, you got to face that fear, whatever that fear is. You know, and I think it, you know, particularly today, it deals with people being afraid to confess Christ. You know, to proclaim their salvation and their faith, their belief. And of course, he tells you if you won't, then he's not going to confess you, and he's not going to, you know, he's not going to know you. And so I believe if you will face that fear and be the ambassador that, you know, that you're supposed to be, then that's the first step towards conquering your fear. And all the other things, like I said, you know, the fear of death, you know, the fear of illness, the fear of poverty, you know, because, you know, we're coming into some hard times here, you know, and it's not just here, it's around the world. And so, you know, because America has lived, you know, lusciously. I mean, we've, you know, even our poor live better than most of the people in the world. And yet they, you know, gripe and complain all the time about how bad it is and all that, but in reality, you know, when you compare our poor to the poor of, say, sub-Saharan Africa or you know, Bangladesh or somewhere, you know, or even South American places like that, I mean, where people scrape and scrimp just to get enough to eat every day. And over here, I mean, there's always been an abundance of food, but that's not the case anymore. You know, and it's because America has, you know, pretty much completely turned its back on the Father and the Son, and rejected it outright. And that's why they're, you know, people are falling for every kind of false religion and false teaching that there is. And why now believers, true believers in Christ, are, you know, beginning to be harassed and going to be persecuted. And so we got to come to the realization that that's just the case. I mean, it's just, you know, no matter what we would like, you know, the reality is that we're going to face persecution. And so the way that you overcome that fear of it is, you know, by confessing Him and being bold in it. And once you face that, then it'll get easier and easier to face your fear. You know, I've always had sort of a fear of heights. You know, I mean, would get up on a real high place and I get vertigo and stuff, you know. But I had to face it. You know, I had to face that fear because I worked in the trades, you know, a lot. You know, in my early years in my early working years, you know, and I had to climb a ladder, you know, 40 foot up in the air, and go up on the top of buildings and roofs and stuff, you know. And so I had to overcome that or else get out of the work I like to do. And so I just did it. I just got on the ladder and went up there, and I done what I had to do. And each time it got a little bit easier, you know. I mean, it wasn't so frightful. And, you know, and that's one of them things that's from the word phobos or phobios, you know, phobia, you know, it's, you know, you have to conquer these things. Now, I ain't saying, you know, if you got a fear of heights, go out here and jump off a bridge on a bungee cord or something, you know. I mean, no, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about realistically facing fear. You know, like me going up the ladder. I mean, if you make the right precautions, take the right precautions, tie the ladder off at the top, you know, stake the bottom of it, or have somebody hold the bottom of the ladder, then you can go up it safely. And you know, and if you really have a strong fear, you can tie yourself off with a, you know, safety harness and stuff like that. But but you have to face these things, because life is full of peril. Even in good times, there's always peril. And so being able to face up to these things, it will actually be like a load of bricks being lifted off of your shoulders, because it's not a good thing to walk around in fear all the time. And like I said about, it's not, I'm not talking about being foolish about fear, just rushing into a dangerous situation without evaluating that situation up beforehand, to see what the perils of it is. I mean, now don't get me wrong, if somebody's in danger, and you can go in and, like in a house fire or a wreck or whatever, you can go in and help get somebody out, then you should. Even without concern for your own safety, because that's just the right thing to do. But I'm talking about, like, if like it's a combat situation, where there's people firing weapons and stuff like that or something, and you wouldn't want to run right into the middle of that. You would want to use some, judgment. But I'm talking about facing the everyday kinds of fears that people tend to have that are, oh, this might happen, and 95% of the things that people fear are going to happen never happen. Only about 5% of the time do the things that we concoct in our own minds that give us fear ever happen. And so, that's why he tells us not to take no thought about things, about what you shall eat or what you shall wear, and stuff like that, because the Father knows what our needs are, and He's going to provide our needs if we're faithful to Him. So that right there should be totally off of the worry, chart. The list of the worries, that should be off of there. And the worrying and fretting over things that might be is not going to change it. It's not going to alter what happens. It's like I tell people, well, I will do, if I have something that would be something that's going to stress or worry a person, I'm going to do whatever I can do to mitigate that. If there's something I can do, to, amend or correct the situation, then I'll do it. If I can't, then I'm not going to sit around and worry over it. I'm going to tell the person, hey man, I can't. I'm sorry. I just can't do it. I ain't got it. I can't, you can't get blood out of a turnip, so to speak. And I'm not going to sit around fretting over it. Because there's too much other things that I can be focused on that are positive things. Like doing this. Like reading the scripture. Like telling somebody. Because all it takes is just a few words. Sometimes faith comes by hearing and hearing by the word. If you can get that out to somebody, that's what you should be thinking about. Not fearing what somebody's going to think. You think about how you might be saving that person out of the pit. You might be helping to harvest that person for the kingdom. And I really believe that, if we do that, and you think about this, if you ever see, for example, like the Mormons, the Jehovah's Witnesses, man, these people, they go out all over the place proselytizing, spreading their message. And theirs is false. Theirs is a false message. But if you want to proclaim the true message of deliverance, why would you feed these people? They don't have no qualms whatsoever about coming and telling you. They believe what they believe. Well, if you believe what you believe, you know what you say you believe, then you have to get out and confess it in front of people and tell them. I mean, we're supposed to be trying to keep people from falling into the pit of destruction. That should be, that should override that fear of what people might think or what people might say or what they might do. And prayer, like I said in the other video, praying, man, praying for the Father to help you to overcome that fear. And give you the strength. Put on that whole armor. Because the enemy, he never stops. He never rests. He never gives up. He never quits. Because this is a war. It may not be a kinetic war where you got bombs being shot at you, but it is a war nonetheless. And it is a war for your mind and for your soul. And, if we can't get that into our minds, because he's going to try to, the enemy is going to try to put that fear there. That's, all they operate off of is fear. And we have to understand that. We have to understand that the enemy is the one that is trying to put this fear in you. But what did I tell you about fear that which can destroy the body and the soul? Don't fear that which can destroy the body, because we're going to die sooner or later anyway. That's a given. I mean, look around you. Get that in your mind that death is inevitable. All right? Stop worrying about that and fearing that. Because if you truly believe what you proclaim and say you believe, if you really believe that you are born again, that you are saved and washed in the regenerating, redeeming blood of the Messiah, Jesus Christ, Yahushua HaMashiach, then he's the one you ought to be fearing. And I mean in a reverential fear. And forget the rest of these. Even if they kill you, they cannot destroy your soul. And that's what's most important to remember, is that this is what we're attaining to. This is what the race is for. We're racing for the prize. And the prize is eternal life. So would you let, irrational fear keep you from that? I mean, because a lot of it is irrational fear. We allow, and it's where a lot of it comes from the fact of people being idle. Not keeping their mind focused on things that are good. I've talked about this in previous messages, about keeping your mind focused on things that are good, that are right. Because whenever you forget that and stop doing that, then that's when you give place to Satan and his minions to start putting that fear back into your mind again. And they're going to do that. They like I said, they don't rest. They never rest, because they have an agenda. They have a purpose to see how many human beings that they can capture and take into the pit with them. And so we got to quit giving them place. And it begins with studying the Word, getting on your knees and praying. Targeted prayer. Specific prayer. Not just, these, all over the place, asking for things that the Father already knows that you need and will provide for you. No, He, target your prayer for Him to deliver you from these things. And sometimes you have to pray more than once. You know, I mean, and you got to work on, like I said, keeping yourself repented up, you know, and not regarding any kind of iniquity in your heart. If you'll do these things, you'll confess him. Because if you believe, like you say you believe, because like I believe it's in the book of James. He said, "You show me your faith without works, and I show you my faith by my works." You show your belief by what you do. And love, the word love is an action word. It means to do. It's not just some kind of a concept. It is it's action. Love is action. And so, if you love the Father and the Messiah, you love your brother, you love your neighbor, then it's going to be shown through action, through what you do. And if you're doing those things, that you should, so that people see, he said, so that people see your good works and they glorify and esteem the Father, then Satan, the enemy, the adversary, he's not going to have any place in you to put that fear in there. And, I know people will say, well, yeah, man, that's easy for you to say. Well, no, I'm human just like any other human. I have things that try to do, that the devil tries to put fear in me too. I mean, but that's why I try to keep doing something like this here. I keep in the scriptures. I talk to people about it. I try to keep my mind on that. I work in a store. A little grocery store, and so you got a lot of free time sometimes in there between customers and stuff. Well, unless you keep your mind occupied, it's easy for the enemy to try to slide in there and start making you think about something that will lead to fear. What's going to happen about that? Are we going to have enough food? Are we going to have enough gasoline? Are we going to have enough of this or that? Well, don't give him place to do that. Like Paul said, whatever is good, whatever is of good report, whatever is pure, whatever has virtue, these things meditate upon, these things think on. And then you don't give the devil a place in your mind. Because I've told, I can't reiterate this enough about where the battle's going on. It's going on right here. It's going on in our minds and for our minds. And, one of my, I'll confess something here, because it says confess your sins before, one another. I have a problem with my temper. I get, especially when it comes to stuff that's really, anybody should really know it, or whatever. I mean, it should be just common sense or whatever, it just kind of, gets on me. But I pray, I pray all the time, for the Father to deliver me from this. And I don't do it as bad as I used to. I'd get, blow up at the drop of a hat, and the scripture says, that somebody that's easy to get angry is kind of unstable. Well, I inherited that. That's an iniquity that I inherited. I inherited it from my mother. Okay, my mother had a quick temper. And so I inherited that from her. Because my dad, he's he will get angry, but he's kind of reserved, he don't just, go off, So I didn't get it from him. I got it from her. And the Father rest her, rest her soul. I believe she's, was born again. But, these are things that we all have to come to grips with, and we all have to deal with it, and of course, like I say, I've been praying, diligently, to be delivered from that. And it's getting better. You know, I mean, I'm getting to the point where little things just don't bother me that much anymore. But that's what I'm talking about. We have to face those things. We have to confess them. We have to face them, and we have to deal with them. And it's the same with fear. We have to confess that we have this fear. We have to face it, and we have to deal with it. And that's the only way you can overcome it. And if we can, if we're going to sit here and say that we're believers, that we are, born again in the Messiah, that we believe he died, was buried, and resurrected, then we have to face the fear of confessing him before man. If we're fearful of that, if we're ashamed of that, why would you be ashamed of something that has delivered you? I mean, when you really begin to sit down and meditate on what the Father, what he done to bring us to salvation instead of destruction. And of course, at any time, he could have destroyed us. But that just all the more proclaims and shows his mercy. Because when you really sit down and you look at the state of mankind, we're a pretty sorry lot. I mean, we just really are. And, without Satan and all of them, I mean, we're just pretty rotten within ourselves. We don't have to blame Satan. We don't have to blame the demonic or anything else. We got plenty of rottenness in ourselves. The thing about them is that they just tempt you and they try to goad you into acting on what's already in you. And so when we acknowledge that, face up to that, confess it, deal with it, then we'll be delivered from those things. The same with fear. If we acknowledge it, that we have this fear, we confess that we have this fear, and we face it. And, pray for the strength to face it. Then we will. If you truly believe. That's one of the reasons why, too, the Messiah said, in the last days, will there be any faith on the earth? Any belief? Because it's hard to see much of it. Even all these people, and the statistics say, 50-60% of Americans are Christians. Well, I kind of beg to differ with that, because their actions don't support that. They're that in name only, just because it's a tradition. And they follow the traditions of men in these apostate, 501c3 corporate beast system churches, and that's exactly what they are. They're tied at the hip with the beast. They do what they tell them to do, and they say what they tell them to say, rather than this. Rather than this being their authority, the beast is their authority. And so, that's because these people, they don't want to give up the things that are of the flesh, the lust of the flesh and the things of this world. But they like the idea of being moral outwardly. Like those Pharisees with their phylacteries and their broad hems on their garments and all that stuff, outwardly. But inside, it's like, Messiah talking about them fretting about washing cups and all that stuff. He said, but within are dead men's bones, like an open sepulcher. There's, inside though is dead men's bones. These people are outwardly, moral. But inwardly, they're like a sepulcher full of dead men's bones. And that's because they're ashamed of the Messiah, the true Messiah. They're going to follow after the false Messiah, the Antichrist. Antichrist, yeah, is opposite or opposed to, but it really means in place of, instead of. And they're going to follow right after him because he appeals to their base nature. And they're going to fall right into it. Because, if it feels good, do it. I mean, you listen to these false teachers that are on TV, these televangelists and people, that are, doing all these abominable things, putting blood into the sacraments whenever they do the communion, when they take the communion, taking their own blood and putting it into the communion cup and drinking it. That is satanic. That's the false communion. But yet they're doing it, and they're convincing these people to do it. So, you got to remember that the elect is a small group of people. It's like I said about, the straight and narrow gate, and few who shall find it. But broad is the way which leadeth unto destruction, and many who shall enter therein. That's because the way and the truth and the life, the true Messiah, they don't know. They don't know him. And so, if you truly say that you believe, then you're going to confess him. You're going to face that fear. You're going to get out there. You're going to tell people if you love them, because that's, again, action. It's an action. And if you really love these people, then you're going to tell them. And you're not going to be ashamed. You're going to be bold because you believe. But if you don't, then you really have to question whether you really believe or not. And part of believing is facing your fear. Facing it head on. And if you do that, he's going to be with you. He will not leave nor forsake you. Ever. But we have to do what he commands us to do. And when we do that, when we take the action, then he's going to give us the strength. He's going to give us the strength to face that fear, to face that challenge. He's going to open those doors, but we have to take the first step. We have to take the first step of belief. Go read about Abraham in Genesis, where he took his son Isaac up there to sacrifice him. The father told him to do it. He did not question it. He just went and done it. He took him up there to do it. And then when he saw that he was really going to do it, he stopped him. He wanted to see if Abraham truly believed what the father told him. And so, that's, where this, and again, I'm sorry if I had a little confusion in that message. But what I was trying to get people to understand is that if you don't face the fears you have now, then you're going to have a hard time facing what's coming. And most of us, we're probably going to go into tribulation, we're probably not going to, expire before then. And so we got to be, facing fears that we have now. We got to face them, we got to confess them, we got to face them, and we've got to conquer them. So that when we do go into this period, it's coming, and we can already see see it kind of rearing its head up. If we ain't facing our fears now and dealing with them, then we're going to really have a hard time. And people are going to have a hard time to keep from taking the mark of the beast. From bowing down to the beast and worshiping him. Because the fear because they're going to threaten you. They're going to, they're even going to put you to death. Eventually, I'm not saying right at the beginning, but eventually they will put people to death for confessing Christ and not bowing down and worshiping the beast. And this includes me, all of us. We all have to face any fears that we have. We have to confess those fears that we have. We have to face those fears, and we have to conquer them in our Messiah. Paul says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And so, he's the source of our strength if we believe. And we strengthen our belief by action. By facing up to these things, by doing it, by confessing Him, by studying His Word, and in prayer, and in meditating on that Word, and keeping our thoughts on good things. Then we don't give the devil place in our mind where he can begin to put fear and doubt, because that's what he's going to do. He's going to put fear and doubt into people as much as he can. If we truly believe, and we say we believe, then we have to put it into action. And, I hope that this is a little more clear, that you understand that the purpose of what I said before, and talking about Matthew 24 and Luke 21, because the Messiah is telling us the things that are going to be coming in the future, that were, to His disciples, that these things are coming, but let not your hearts be troubled. For these things must come to pass. There has to be a peak of sin. Sin has to reach its peak before it can be put, so that man is without excuse. It comes to its peak, and man will not be able to stand in front of judgment and say, hey, I didn't know, because the Father's done everything. Everything He can do to try to wake us up and to get us on the right path. But it's up to us to choose that right path and to believe. And of course, we see, that His Word is coming to pass. And that in itself ought to strengthen people's belief, because these things are being fulfilled. The Scriptures, the prophecies of the Scriptures, they're all coming to pass right in front of our face. If we have eyes to see it and ears to hear, and a heart of understanding, then we will, see these things. And that in itself should be a boost to our belief. This is real. This is real. And what it says is real. It's happening. That ought to be like I say, that ought to be a boost to our belief. All the more. And make us all the more determined to confess our Redeemer and be bold in our belief. Show people, let them see it, and maybe you'll win somebody over for the kingdom. Well, folks, I'm going to kind of let it go there. I hope that I was a little more clear, and again, I apologize, if I confused anybody. That's not what my intent is. My intent is to give clarity to this stuff, and to be as clear and as concise and simplified as much as I can for people to be able to understand it. And hopefully to reach somebody for the kingdom. And so I just wanted to try and clarify that, what I was trying to do. And you can see, it's almost another 40 minutes here so far, not to mention the other. But it's like when I was going to church, when I was younger, sometimes the preacher, preached for an hour or so, and then other times he'd preach for an hour and a half, 2 hours, because in order to get the message across, it just took that much time. And I should have thought a little bit more, put a little more thought in it, that, okay, there's no way I can really truly get what I'm trying to say here across in this short amount of time. But I just don't want to cause people to become, tired or bored or their mind get to wandering and stuff like that. I'll try to keep them as compact as I can while still getting the message I'm trying to deliver out. So I hope y'all kind of, have a little understanding. And I'll try to do better in the future, to think it out a little bit more about how I'm bringing this the message, so that I can get the point that I'm trying to bring home out with where you can understand it and not be confused. And so with that, I'm going to end it here. I love you. I hope you be blessed, and as always, be a good Berean. Receive what I tell you with an open mind, but search the scriptures to see whether these things be true. Don't take my word for it. Do your homework. Pursue truth in everything. And the source of truth is this. And everything else can be judged off of this. With that, I'll see you next time, Yahuwah willing.